Streaming gimana streaming? Ini yang kongres kan belum datang ya? Udah. Pak Kak. Mister Kanok. Oh, udah.
Chulalongkorn University is located in the heart of Bangkok, on a lush campus dotted with a blend of ancient and contemporary architecture. It was the first university in Thailand, initiated by King Chulalongkorn. It was formally established by King Wachiravut on the 29th of March, 1917, to commemorate his father's wish to establish and develop an institution of higher learning.
Currently, about 37,000 students are enrolled in Chulalongkorn University, 25,000 undergraduate and 12,000 graduate. The university has a faculty of more than 3,000 members and staff of 5,000 personnel.
Chulalongkorn University is recognized as one of the leading universities in Thailand. It offers comprehensive degree programs at both the graduate levels and undergraduate levels. Countless generations of Chulalongkorn graduates have contributed significantly in all sectors of Thai society. As part of the university's mission, it provides support for Chula researchers in various fields of study who have received awards in Thailand and abroad every year. While their discoveries and innovations help to improve the quality of life for all. Chula students have also won many awards in other fields such as sports and art and culture.
Chulalongkorn University is now emerging as a world-class national university. It is expanding academic collaboration with many universities around the world and is actively involved in numerous student exchange projects. Chulalongkorn University affords a very soothing green learning environment as well as comprehensive learning experience with its modern laboratories, impressive galleries, and Center for Art and Culture, enhancing the lives of students, faculty, and staff. The university continues to forge ahead to produce quality graduates to contribute to Thai society and the country.
at Paragon International University and the team member of at Social Sciences of University of Cambodia. So it's a great honor to be the moderator for this international conference. So let me introduce you the agenda of today's discussion and meeting from 9:45 to 10 a.m. We have an opening ceremony welcome remark by Professor Dr. Khanok Vong Ragan, member parliament of Thailand Democrat Party, and we have another 4 distinguished speakers or panelists from Indonesia, Thailand, and Australia. So the first speaker have 25 minutes and 5 minutes for Q&A. So the first speaker, let me introduce Professor Dr. Arif Rachman, the University of Indonesia. And the second speaker, Dr. Atafu Rahman from University, Thailand. Right, we will talk about the character of education. Right, he has 25 minutes as well for his presentation. And another third speaker, Professor Dr. Greg Butler from Australia. He has 25 minutes for his presentation as well. So his topic is about character education. And the final speaker is Professor Dr. Raymond Cannon from Australia. He has 25 minutes to do the presentation as well. So topic of the discussion today would cover character education. So let me welcome Professor Khanok Vong Raman to deliver your address. The floor is your process.
Halo.
Oke, sudah Pak.
Halo, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is it my turn now?
Dr. Khanok.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Khanok, are you here? Right, we have a little bit physical error, so we just wait for him a little bit, and we reschedule our discussion. We apologize for the inconvenience. So please wait a little bit. Dr. Khanok, can you hear us? Good morning from Cambodia, Dr. Khanok.
Yang disuruh ngomong nggak ngomong.
Okay. Hello. Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Everyone can hear you? Can hear me now, right?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. All right.
Okay. May I start now?
Please.
Okay. Distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to kindly thank Edu Universal for inviting me to share my experiences and thoughts on youth morals, and values education today, we are all here sharing our common concerns, namely, future of our youth, our students to be in particular, especially their future living and lives. As we know that our students have been challenged by drugs, sexual abuse, street fights, and social violence, as well as unfiltered flow of information and negative contents accessible to everyone, which caused damages and tensions to our society, particularly our children and students. Therefore, the topic of our meeting today is very timely, appropriate, and urgent. First of all, I wish to emphasize that education is very crucial to our youth and our contemporary society. We must ensure that education will perform its function at its best quality in the present context of our society. As we learn, education has three important functions. First, protective function. Education serves to implant moral and values into our students' mind and soul. These morals and values will secure their life and consequently will help to lay a foundation for collaboration and coherence in our society. Second, commutative function. Education helps to actualize student potentialities by teaching them right from wrong, good from bad. This learning will form their social norm and responsibility, as well as integrity. Third, formative function. Education will pave the way for cultural innovation and scientific development of our society, in addition to a creation of new ideas and invention. Now, may I share my personal observation on confronting tensions of our contemporary global community. First, tradition vis-a-vis modernity. Second, global vis-a-vis local issues. Third, competition vis-a-vis collaboration. Fourth, long-term vis-a-vis short-term objectives. And fifth, spiritual vis-a-vis material needs. Our contemporary societies are full of these five tensions in various forms of living reality. And these tensions force our children and students to choose every day. As a matter of fact, it is very possible and easy for them to choose those choices based on their reactive decision and common sense, which could put them into jeopardized and dangerous situation, which consequently could risk their safety and future. In order to secure their life and future, our children and students urgently need morals and values education to guide them into their future. They certainly need to follow the straight path towards God, Sirat al-Mustaqim. Morals and values education will guide them towards a more just world and to build a better world to live in for all. A key question to be asked now is, what are moral and values needed for our contemporary and future global communities? From my education works in Pattani, a southern province of Thailand, I learned that three important problems confronting our southern communities are poverty, ignorance, and internal conflict. Over 10 years of my continuing hard works in the areas, I am convinced that morals and values are essential in addressing these three problems. The moral values would be the key to problem-solving solution are as follows: justice, freedom, responsibility, respect, tolerance, love, generosity, truthfulness, and God-fearing. Therefore, these 9 moral values are necessary qualities of our education in order to develop the body, mind, and spirit, and to shape character of our future generations. I would like to urge all panelists and participants to share and focus their practical experiences on how to inculcate those 9 values into the spirit of our students. These 9 moral values can be reflected in 3 levels, namely, first, individual values, such as love and tolerance. Second, relationship values, such as responsibilities and respect. Third, social values, such as justice and freedom. Our students must know and understand those values. Then they must be able to practice them. These values must be a part of their character and personality. Last but not least, our students must be able to live and interact with other people through those 9 values. The critical questions for us all now is how to teach our students, and they will learn these 9 values in the context of contemporary society. May I offer my practical experiences to this question? First, teachers have to bring real problems from students' community into their classroom. Then the teacher have to formulate those problems into questions for students to discuss and search for their solution. And let our students think and discuss the posted problems independently and freely. The teachers must encourage students to exchange their ideas and learn from each other. At the end of the teaching period, the teachers will moderate all students' ideas into key points, which reflect their problem analysis and problem solving. This conclusion or synthesis of students' exercise will be their learning output, and hopefully there will be students' learning outcome later in their life. Dear colleagues, these 9 values will serve as the students' way of thinking and behaving, as their means of judging their confronting realities, and in choosing their daily living choices. And hopefully, these moral values will serve as their guidance in their life and their social roles. When moral and values education could perform its functions as explained, moral values will perform as social control and resident truths of our communities. Moral values will reflect our children's sense of right and wrong, and their decision made every day will be a reflection of these values. As a result, peace and harmony will be sustainably established and secured in our communities, regardless of all kinds of diversities we may have in our global communities. Finally, I wish to congratulate the international webinar on youth, morals, and values education, particularly all distinguished scholars from various countries who will share their valuable knowledge and experiences on the topic issues from now on. With your permission, may I end my opening remark on my humble and limited experiences and thoughts on youth, morals, and values education at this point. I wish you all productive dialogue and success in this important endeavor. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you indeed.
Thank you so much, Dr. For your very insightful opening remark. And we are pleased to welcome our first speaker, Professor Arif Rahman, University of Indonesia, UNESCO Ambassador. He will be going to deliver a topic on building your character through practicing moral principles and moral education. So the floor is yours first.
Good morning. Hello, can you hear my voice?
Yes, sir. We are hearing you.
Thank you very much. I would like to say thank you to Eduversal, Dr. Dwi Prayitno Wibowo, and I really appreciate your invitation to me, and I would like to embrace also Eduversal with the motto, success is the sum of details. And that is very, very true. Now, I have the opportunity to give material on building youth character through practicing moral principle and value education. Next slide, please. UNESCO Constitution begins with a view to fulfilling the mission of United Nations. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Halo, siapa? Yang ngatur? Pak Jamal. Yes, thank you very much. UNESCO begins with this, the saying that avoiding peace is the source of war, as follows: since war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. So what is peace? Next slide. It's not only the absence of war or other forms of violence, but also the presence of value, of harmony within oneself and within the environment. What is the culture of peace? Next slide. Is dismantling a culture of war, living with justice and compassion, promoting human rights responsibility, building intercultural respect, reconciliation, and solidarity, living in harmony with the earth, and cultivating inner peace. The definition of education according to the article of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, your education should be directed to the full development of human personality and to strengthening respect of human rights and fundamental freedom. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, friendship among all the nations, racial and religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. So the content of education to foster peace building is teaching the educating respect for human rights and diversity, fostering critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication, promoting of media and digital literacy, development of the behavioral of social emotional skills, provision of universal human value, solidarity, tolerance, empathy, respect, harmony, equality, cooperation, and synergy, and provision of relevant learning material. UNESCO action strategies contributing to peace education, promoting experimentation, innovation, and the diffusion and sharing of the information and best practices, as well as policy dialogue in education, and providing human rights, global citizenship through the 5 pillars of education for the 21st century. What are the 5 pillars? The 5 pillars of the 21st century, in a report of the International Commission of Education, in UNESCO in 1996, stresses that each individual must be equipped to seize learning opportunities throughout life, to broaden her or his knowledge, skills, and attitude, and to adapt to a changing, complex, and interdependent world. Advocates 5 pillars of education. And the 5 pillars of education is learning to know, which is learning how to learn, develop critical thinking, acquire to understand the world, understand sustainable concepts and issues, learning to do, understand and act, and global and local sustainable development issues. Next slide, please. Acquire technical, next slide, please. Acquire technical and professional training and apply the learned knowledge in daily life. And learning to be is encourage discovery and experimentation, acquire universal shared value, develop one's personality, be able to act with greater autonomy, judgment, and personal responsibility. And the last one is learning to live together. Means, next slide, please. Participate and cooperate with others in increasingly pluralistic, multicultural society. Develop an understanding of other people and their histories, tradition, belief, values, and culture. Tolerate, respect, and welcome and embrace, even celebrate differences and the diversity of people, and respond to constructively to the cultural diversity and economic disparity found around the world, and be able to cope with situations, tension, exclusion, conflict, violence, and terrorism. Learning to transform oneself and society, meaning we have the knowledge and value and skill for transforming attitude and lifestyle. Work toward a gender-neutral, non-discriminatory society. Develop the ability and will to integrate sustainable lifestyle for ourselves and others, and promote behaviors and practices that minimize our ecological footprints on the world around us, and be respectful of the earth and life in all its diversity, act to achieve societal solidarity, and promote democracy in society where peace prevails. Understanding moral values, what is moral? Is the principle and value based on what a person of society believes are the right and proper acceptable ways of behaving. Value is a person or group the moral principle and belief, what they think are important in life, and they tend to their lives by such value as guiding principle. The moral principle to be practiced is trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, citizenship. And trustworthiness means work with little supervision, yet seek guidance as needed. Next slide, please. Be honest, reliable, and ethical in all dealing, and refuse to steal, misuse, or abuse company time, property, or equipment. Refuse to lie, cheat, deceive, manipulate, exploit, or take advantage of others. Respect meaning and honor all people, respect the dignity and privacy, use good manners, listen to and communicate openly with others, be friendly and cooperative, and responsibility, show initiative, pay attention to detail, pursue excellence, Be loyal. Strive to improve abilities and learn new skills and take on broader responsibilities. Be accountable, fulfill commitments, persevere, and get the job done. Fairness, listen, know your job, communicate honestly, consider all stakeholders and the possible short and long-term consequences of decision, be free of bias just without favoritism or prejudice, use tact and courtesy, share knowledge, ideas, and skills with others. And caring, next slide, strive for harmonies, mutually beneficial relationship, show kindness and sensitivity to the feeling of others, express gratitude, show personal concern for others, take time to help others, be kind, and be kind. Citizenship, understand and contribute to the organization, take care of equipment and under sources, pursue lifelong learning, volunteer without expectation of recognition or reward, be a role model and mentor to new employees. And value to be practiced, next slide please, is ethical value, social value, spiritual value, and educational value. Ethical value, next slide, means resistance to temptation, righteousness, sense of responsibility, self-control, non-aligned, and social value is cooperation, mutual respect, sharing, and concern. Spiritual value is purity, tolerance, faith, and piety. Educational values, respect, responsibility, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. Process of quality value in enhancement, evaluation of current situation, creating condition for change, implementing changes, evaluating whether the change has made something better or not. So what is character? Character is the inherent complex of attributes that determine a person's moral and ethical action and reaction. So character to be developed is honesty, competent, inspiring, courageous, tact, fairness, loyal integrity, confident, unselfish, responsibility, citizenship, caring, trustworthiness, and respect. So human potential, we have 5, the spiritual potential, intellectual potential, physical and kinesthetic potential, emotional potential, and social potential. Now, what is impacting moral character development? Next slide. What is good character? What causes or prevent good character? How can good character be measured? How can good character best be developed? What is good character? Personnel, honest and truthfulness, autonomous, responsible, courageous, and integrity. And impacting moral character development. What causes or prevent good character? Heredity, early childhood experience, modeling by important adult and older youth, peer influence, general physical and social environment, communication media, content taught in school. Now, we have also the 4th, how can character be measured? Cognitive knowledge, age-appropriate cognitive moral development, values expressed, commitments expressed, written plans, personal and social overt behavior. And number 4, how can good character best be developed? by effective communication and good shared values, family, schools, religious organization, and communication. Now, the improvement of youth character through the following tips. Number one, achieve your dream. Believe in yourself. Enjoy your work. Give more than what is enough. Hang on to your dreams. And then ignore those who try to destroy you. Next slide. Just be yourself. Keep trying no matter how hard life may seem. Learn to love yourself and make things happen. Motivation when your dreams. Never lie and cheat or steal. Open your eyes, and practice makes perfect. Practice is about motivation. Let us learn from our mistake. Take control of yourself. Next slide. And understand others. Want it more than anything. Dreaming means believing, and to believe is something that is rooted out from the roots of motivation and self-improvement. Improvement of youth character through the following tips. X factor is what will make you different from others. When you are motivated, you tend to put on extras on your life, like extra time for family, extra time to help at work, extra care for field, and so on. You are unique. You are not the same as the others. No one on this world looks, acts, and talks like you. Value your life and existence, because you are just going to spend it more. Thank you very much. And if there is any question, I like to answer the question right now, because I'm very sorry. I have Mr. Vanak. I have short time and I have another commitment. So with your permission, Mr. Vanak, if there is any question, I like to answer the question as you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Right. We have a question to you. Right. So the question is, how can we install the universal moral to youth while we are practicing our values? So the question may be go to Dr. Kenneth too. Right. Thank you.
Yes. So practicing moral is very abstract. So you must give example, yeah, behavior, trustworthy. Then the children, the other people will look at you and will take care of their behavior like your moral and ethic value. So number one is give example. And if the example give good result, they will follow. Thank you very much. Next question, if there is any.
Thank you so much. So the same question may go to Dr. Kenneth, because we haven't asked him first. So Dr. Kenneth, can you answer the question that I addressed to Dr. Arif? So may I repeat the question again? How can we install universal moral to youth while we are practicing our values? Dr. Kenneth, can you hear me? No, maybe he left. Okay. should welcome the question from the participant. Right. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Riff. We gonna to, because of the time, we will invite our guest speaker, second guest speaker, to address this discussion. Thank you so much for your insightful comments and very inspirational presentation. Move to the second speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fanak. If you allow me, can I leave the meeting because I have another obligation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your valuable time for us. Right. Stay healthy.
Okay.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
So I would like to invite
Anur.
our distinguished second panelist, Dr. Alatafer Rahman, Thongsan University, Thailand. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So good morning and greeting of peace to all of you. Dear moderator, distinguished guest, and distinguished participants in the webinar. It is my pleasure to join this webinar today and let's sum up the discussion regarding the morals and youth and education. So I may start by sharing the slide if the slide is there. Do you have the slide with the organizing? Otherwise, I can share also.
You can share by yourself, Mr. Altafor.
Okay. So let me share the slide then. Okay. So I intend to speak about the sub-segment of the topic today, which is related to the trends and challenges of moral education. My discussion will limit only on 4 topics that I want to cover. And a lot of the discussion background actually already been given by distinguished 2 speakers before me. So let me share what are the things I want to cover. First of all, I want to see the topic from a philosophical point of view and try to analyze what are the aspects of philosophy we can think about the moral education for the youth. The second aspect that I want to focus on is try to understand what kind of trend we are talking about. The trend those are emerging in developing and delivering moral teaching and moral education, and the kind of derailment from the regular trend that we had, and the new emergence of the trend, what is that? So we want to analyze that part as well. My third point will be to understand some of the contemporary dilemmas. By stating dilemmas, I'm basically meaning those challenges, those are generated in the way of developing the moral education. And finally, I want to understand a little bit about how we can position some positive note. So basically positioning hopes. That's what the structure of our discussion today. So without further background, let us start the discussion. So if we want to understand the moral education of our youth, there are some types of confusion remain within the concept. One of the approach that we know in the discussion, we call it societal argument, or we can say the argument based on the society. Now, as Cohen mentioned, a society that abandons moral education will be a debased an untrustworthy one. So the outcome of a society which doesn't culture the moral education is not going to have a social structure at the end. It's not going to sustain at the end. So the societal argument of moral education virtually tends to lead us in the area of cohesion, where the moral education is such an important tool to build the society. The second argument that we often witness in the discussion of moral education is the educational argument. So in that area, if we see that the dimension of education, which our opening speaker actually mentioned that quite elaborately, that education itself has a component of morality. So if we are not connecting the morality within the education, then it might lose the very notion of education, which doesn't promote the psychomotor, which doesn't promote our inner self as a human being. So we cannot materialize what is truly education. We may provide some skill. There could be a lot of information. Those are being provided to the student. But truly educated personhood cannot be created. And we need to understand that dilemma by seeing the difference between morals and ethics. Although oftentimes we tend to bring this together. But there's a slight difference when you're talking about ethical aspect. We're basically talking about normative aspect, the societal aspect. But the morals oftentimes constitute the individual value aspect. So it could be very different depending on the person, the way the person is socialized, the circumstances and environment is influencing the person, and the value being created within the person. And that's a very important thing to understand when you're talking about moral as an education approach. That means we have to nurture the quality of the person, the value of the person that is already built among us. And we have to promote that out. So if this is the case, what kind of philosophical view that we can have to understand the moral education? So I want to just refer three major philosophical approach, and then I will go for three major political philosophical approach. The first philosophical approach is very often known as naturalistic argument, and which we know for sure, like Socrates and so on, that tends to explain the morality as a natural process. And the belief as a human possesses the morality, positive morality, as a part of its natural process, natural being. And that's why he said, no one willingly does wrong. So basically, the idea of positive aspect naturally embedded in human is widely recognized by this natural argument of morality. Secondly, if we want to argue the positive argument from a knowledge point of view, we can bring both Aristotle and Rousseau together, because both of them were trying to put this morality as a positive virtue within the human being. So the idea is, it is by doing good that we become good. So there has to be a notion of practice. And there is a kind of complementary relationship with the argument made by Plato, who was trying to approach morality from a development point of view, meaning that the educational development process, the stages that we overcome, we pass through, in that process, the morality comes in. So we are nurturing the morality. So what we have found from this discussion is, when you're talking morality as a philosophical point of view, we are basically recognizing it as a natural component among the human being, and we have to nurture it. We have to provide certainly a positive environment for the growth of morality, to cultivate the morality within human being. But that becomes a little bit confusion, little bit difficult once we approach the morality from a political philosophical perspective. And that is all the division we can see starts there. If you're looking at Marx, then you can see the aspect of morality here differs from the proletariat and bourgeois. The notion of proletariat morality is materializing or realizing their class struggle is something which doesn't really match with the bourgeois morality. So you can see a very different set of growth of morality in the political philosophical aspect. Similarly, when you talk about Locke, John Locke, we can feel the notion of argument, of social contract, the way individual engage with the society. The social contracts varied from a person to person. That also determine the kind of morality we have and the kind of morality we develop in the society. There's also not enough to mention about the theological and religious perspective, which also offer a political philosophical perspective, the morality, like Saint Thomas, who then from a Christian political philosophical view was arguing morality from two different arguments. There's a good argument and then devil component. And nurturing good argument or the good component is the morality. And we know, of course, there are all the great religion come up with their own interpretation of morality, which has some component of political philosophy as well. So by discussing the philosophical aspect of morality, what we have seen so far, number one, there is a strong founding of morality in the human nature. But it cannot be realized without proper nurturing. And it becomes confused, it becomes difficult when we apply a lot of political philosophical framework to the morality. And probably that's why the challenges, those are now in the discussion, what we can say, the kind of train that emerges in the moral education. In the moral education, the emerging trend, I want to discuss in three different segments. The first one, what are the legal and programmatic framework that we have at the moment. I'm very glad that our previous discussion, Professor Arif, mentioned about UN approach. But when we're talking about the UN programmatic approach, we know the SDG 4, which is dedicated for the education, doesn't speak about morality. The entire 10 different arguments that we have, essentially talking about quality education, non-discrimination, access to education, but doesn't speak about the morality there. So what we can see in the framework of education, in a normative way, morality is not the prior concern in the programmatic aspect. And that's the trend, whether we like it or not, but that's what is happening. Secondly, when you talk about the preference, the personal preference in the scope of exercising morality, we can see that there is a transformation that is taking place now from the nation-centric laws and values, which are now being prioritized over the moral laws and moral values. The state-centric view is highly prioritized, where the moral view doesn't really take its place. We know for sure the sovereign authority is the ultimate authority determine what would be the moral parameter, moral standard of a given country. Excuse me. So this is a significant trend in the moral education that we are witnessing now. The third one, and this is again a very important trend that we are witnessing, which is cultural integration. Whether we accept it or not, we are living in a globalized era. And in this globalized era, what is happening is we are de-promoting cultural integration. It is de-promoting the culture Does it prioritize certain group, certain segment? These are getting lost. Rather, we are creating a new culture, which is a global culture. And to some extent, it is posing a threat to the morality which are possessed by section of population, group of population, and even individual. So the overwhelming force of globalization, the overwhelming force of unitary cultural approach is taking away some of the core cultural value that we possess from our morality. So the trend that we are talking is significantly impacting what we call moral education. Now, let's move our third point. Then what could be the dilemma now? When you understand the philosophical foundation, we understand the trends, then what are the dilemma now? I want to discuss the dilemma into three different categories. The first category, we discuss the dilemma from a structural point of view. So from a structural point of view, we know there is a question now, very popular question, is the reality, morality, or moral education is a realistic idea? So Harold Lux, which interpret in his article like an approach to moral education, raised the fundamental question in a very simple version, simple sentence, saying that, will the young moralist who broadly wants to do the right thing, that means morally right thing, and is skilled in discovering what is right thing is, actually do it? This quotation raised three significant elements, meaning, although we are saying there is a challenge in moral education, but yet we have an urge to learn the moral education. We want to do the morally correct thing, which is a natural component. Secondly, there is skill to obtain those kind of moral things because we know what is morally correct. So the skill is there. But the problem is whether that skill could be practically implemented. So that's the dilemma now we're suffering. So what is happening in the moral education aspect, what we learn from the book and what we see in the practical world doesn't match, doesn't correspond. The good thing that we talk about, but in our practical life, this can become very difficult to really profess. And that's a very big dilemma. And this dilemma rages in the individual, in a group, or even in a country. And that's why probably a country or a nation try to use the moral perimeter, but don't hesitate to attack or provide aggression to an innocent country. So the book and the practical world doesn't correspond, doesn't match. That's a very big dilemma. Number two, when you're talking about moral education, we also has to feel that we are transforming ourselves. And we are transforming so fast due to the innovation, technological development. Now that we have AI, we have robotics, and we have all those new things which are generated. The question comes, who determine the moral ground? Are we giving machine the right to determine what is morality? That means this dilemma is now promoting more and more the, the conflict between the human moral versus the application of moral. The final point of the first dilemma is morals are replaced by law and regulation and guideline. So we are now more interested to see what is in the book of law rather than what is morally correct. We are interested to see what is legally correct than the morally correct. So this is the first segment of the dilemma that we want to talk. Sorry. The second segment of dilemma, we call it the confusion due to the fear of adopting the morality. So the idea of the fear is that, which explained by John Wilson in the book of Introduction to Moral Education, saying that due to a lack of communication and lack of clarity about the common ground of rationality, which must underlie all beliefs, believers and disbelievers may expand their energies to a sterile war. So the notion is this sort of relationship is creating a conflict, and we are not sure about the uncertain future. We are not sure about the uncertain goal. So we are not ready to accept some of the things which are even morally correct. So that fear among our younger population, younger generation, is definitely higher because they are really navigating an uncharted territory, uncharted water. And that's why my third set of dilemma want to explain a little bit more practical thing of the world that we are witnessing. So what we are witnessing is injustice. We are witnessing injustice in the international system. We know some country has more power over the other country in international law. We profess equality in the international law, but we don't really practice the equality in international law. There are legal systems which justify or allow the violation and perpetration of human rights violation. And people can escape with that. We can see that democratization doesn't take shape in some places. And all these things are basically demoralize human population, especially our younger population. And that what really take away the moral education value from them. We can see the scope of equal opportunity is struggling, whether you're talking about education institute, whether you're talking about job market, or whether you're talking about the greater goodness. Sorry. So what is happening in that context? First, the world politics are mostly based on realism, the theory of realism, which gives the idea that the country will do whatever best for the country, not regarding what is good for other. So which clearly deny the moral positioning. Secondly, the thing that we are professing and the thing that we are practicing in our personal life, economic life, doesn't match. We learn to be minimalized, but our credit card, advertisement, and all those different consumerism tell us to be self-centered. So at the personal level, we cannot profess the morality. Our weaker competitor are left away from sharing the benefit of the global progress. We can see the resource gap are being increasing between the countries, within the society. Rich are becoming richer and poorer are becoming poorer. So we don't see the morality in practice. And that's a very big dilemma that we will face in the process of moral education. In terms of institution and infrastructure of moral education, we know we have a problem of teacher. We have a problem of infrastructure. We have a problem of curriculum. Those things probably easily rectified and overcome. But the structure of the society, the order of the international order is very difficult to rectify. So I would say the main challenge, main dilemma would remain the practicality versus the idealism which we profess in the morality education. Now that leaves our final discussion point. What, if this is the case, is there any hope? Yes, there are hope. And of course, humans are surviving with the hope. Without hope, we cannot progress. Our civilization cannot move ahead. So what are the hope? I want to bring again two different arguments to understand the hope. The first argument are again morally systematic argument. And the systematic argument says we need to adopt newer approach in our education. We need to come up with the idea that if methodological change or shift is needed, we need to do it. So probably just an example like the dialectic method, which we know was overwhelmingly philosophical but moral as well. It may not provide the technical skill among some, but it will provide the grounding as a human. So more probably we need to make a balance between some of the method that we apply in our education system. Secondly, we need to adjust with the contemporary need. We need to come up with the solution, not only the policy solution, but also the solution in our whole approach of education. Are we looking our education as a business product or an endeavor as an enterprise, or we are looking education as a service, creating human being as a greater member of the society? That kind of approach shift is very vital. We also need to think about the structure where the moral education is really possibly run. We have two different kind of schooling system. We have school of choice. We have school that professes some of the theological school. We can say that sometime when you're trying to profess the moral education, more often this parochial education institute become at the forefront. But those that sometimes become very difficult to universally acceptable. So can we really bring moral education as a component in the public education system, where the state need to share some of the values from their rules regulation along with the morals? And that's a very key component of sudden change, sudden shift that we want to do. Can we come up with some common standard that will be professed not only by those who are progressing in the moral education, but also the diverse group that we have across the world, and come up with something that common, and we accept that as a moral perimeter. Probably the last argument is whether there could be any solution as a moral universalism, which we know we are shifting ourselves from an individual as a group moral ground to something more universal, coming up with some set of values which would be universally acceptable. So the positiveness of this argument is moral universalism, that is a meta-ethical position we can create. Now, this is a big challenge because we have to really identify what are those standards of universality of moral universalism. But it also has a challenge. The challenge would be this, universalism could have a situation where the sheer diversity of moral, which is uniquely set among the people in different parts of the world, may be denied. So the diversities also need to be nurtured in the process of moral education. That's so much I want to share with the floor today. So thank you very much. If you have any question, you're most welcome.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Haman, for your insightful comment and good presentation. So we have a question from our audience, right? From Winda from Indonesia want to ask you the question. So the question is, what is the cause of the loss of moral values so that a young generation dare to commit reckless beyond their age limits? She addressed the concern that a younger generation terrorist suspect attack the police office and was shot dead. So again, her question is, what is the cause of the loss of moral values so that a young generation dares to commit recklessness beyond their age limits?
Okay, thank you for the question, and I'm very glad that this question has been asked. And definitely, we can say that in the discussion that we have come up is there is a lot of structural problem. There's a lot of situational problem and challenges that we are facing, and which really put an understanding among a lot who are within the scope of education, seeing there is a gap. There is a gap between what they are learning or pushed to learn and what is really happening in the world. So much so injustice within the scope of the society and the structure of the society that could push anyone to be demoralized. And a demoralized population is most vulnerable population of any sort of crime those could be, those be committed by them. And we know that if there is not a moral perimeter for someone, that means it could be easily replaced by other moral perimeter. Human cannot move or grow without any guideline, any guidance. So if you do not possibly put something positive which the person should have, then the person could be really exploited by other component by giving a different standard of morality. And that's why probably we can see there is a trend of, youths are taking extremism. They are professing, some of them, extremism. We can see there is a trend of rejectionism in the society. Some are getting aloof. We are also seeing there is a trend of people who are psychologically become isolated from the society. So all these things are generated because we are not inclusive. We are not providing something which supposed to be there. So probably one way of solving this crisis is to allow a standard moral offering for all, and that probably bring them back from those negative way or negative trend they are heading for. Is it okay?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Raman, right, for your good answer, right? Very insightful comment. And we would like to invite the third speaker. Thank you so much, Dr. Raman, for again, right? So we would like to invite another panelist, right? The third speaker, Dr. Greg Barton from Australia. So Dr. Barton, the floor is yours. Dr. Greg Barton. Dr. Greg Barton. Right. So because we don't get any response from him, we would like to invite the last panelist, our fourth speaker, Professor Dr. Raymond Canning, right, from Australia. So the floor is yours, Professor. You have 25 minutes to do a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, it's good afternoon in Canberra, where I'm from. So good morning to you. I'll share my screen with you. Fine. So you can see my screen, can you?
Yes, we can see, Mr. Ryan.
That's good. Well, distinguished moderator, distinguished guests and participants, good morning to you, as it is for many of you, and good afternoon from Canberra. And thanks to Eduversal for inviting me to participate in this seminar. What I intend to do is to speak generally from various sources about moral and ethical values and principles, and then just to take two of those values, that is humility and solidarity, and to give some examples of those values and principles. The examples I'll take from the Abrahamic religions, particularly from the Quran, and in relation to the Sunnah of Muhammad, praise be unto him, and also from Pope Francis. So that's more or less the form that my presentation will take. So we're looking first of all at a scheme that is put forward by a very well-known person whose name I will leave for the moment and ask you to think who it might be, who diagnoses the sickness in society or in societies and offers a cure to that sickness. So the sickness is defined in terms of despair, deceit, enmity, disunity, despotism, oppression, and individualism. And I think we could all come up with many ready examples of those sicknesses in society and in our cultures, even at the present time. Although the person that I'm talking about, whose scheme this is, was operating 100 years or more ago.
Excuse me, Dr. Canning, we apologize to disturb you. Please open your slide presentation. We cannot see your slide presentation.
Oh. It says that I'm screen sharing.
You have screen sharing, but we see all your folder or your file, but we cannot see your slide.
I think down on the page there is a presentation. Professor Raymond, you should open that. End of your page. The last file in your screen.
Just would you excuse me for a minute? I'll get my daughter to help me.
Yeah.
Are you there, Mark? Is Molly there?
And everyone, you can take the question right to me, and then I will pick up your question to ask our guest speaker. Thank you.
I'll just try it again. So you can see me now? You can see me, can you? Yeah. So I'm going to screen share.
Yes.
And I'm going to go to the document. So my slide, my screen should be up now. Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Can you see that?
We cannot see it. We still see your folder, but we don't see your slide.
Oh, well, I have the slide up.
Yeah, we can share slide for you.
Mr. Raymond, are you sharing your screen or are you sharing your folders?
No, I've got the folder and I've clicked on it.
When you start sharing, you need to click share screen, not share folder.
No, I've clicked to share screen. Share screen.
Share screen. The screen.
Okay, Doctor, no worry, right? We share this slide presentation for you, right?
Or you can share the folder in the chat box.
Dr. Raymond, if
it tells me that I'm screen sharing.
Please, you just end the screen share and I will share the slide for you on the screen.
Righto.
Okay, you can just end the screen share.
Yeah, I've done
I will
that.
share the slide for you.
Can you see the slide now?
Not yet. How about if you can continue without slide, is it okay?
No, I really need the slides to.
Maybe just a minute, we can search. Okay, we are going to start to share Mr. Raymond's presentation. Please, Mr. Raymond, stop sharing screen.
Okay.
Mr. Raymond, on top of your screen, there is a green area. From there, you may stop sharing the screen.
I see, yes.
Yeah, after that, we can share your presentation.
The green, I can't. Oh, top to bottom. Are you?
Now we are sharing your presentation, Mr. Raymond.
Right, thank you very much. So if you go to the next slide, the sickness of society that I was describing is there on the left-hand side. And the cure that is proposed by this author is listed on the right-hand side. So instead of despair, hope; instead of deceit, honesty; instead of enmity, love; instead of disunity, unity; instead of despotism, dignity; instead of oppression, justice; and instead of individualism and each person for himself, consultation and a commitment to the common good. So would you please go to the next slide? So we see then the sickness moving to the cure, as we have described both of them. And this particular author from about a century ago speaks of the need to struggle against ignorance, poverty, and disunity. And that may give you an indication of the person that we're talking about. And so I ask the question, whose schema is this? And if we go to the next slide, we will see the person. Well, we won't see him quite yet, but we will describe the sick civilization. So the prevailing civilization in its sick perspective, a civilization in which might makes right, self-interest and competition, just concern for myself, and it's a zero-sum game, getting ahead of everybody else. The law of the jungle, everyone for himself. My race and my nation are superior to all others, and I have a right to whatever I want. So it is my desire that rules over everything else. And if we could go then to the next slide. Oh, we need to go back to the slide, thank you. The desirable civilization, and you've already caught a glimpse of the person whose scheme this is. And the civilization is presented in terms of the principles of the Quran. So the cure for that sickness that we have described is in a civilization along the lines of Islamic principles. And in this civilization, it is truth which makes right, not might. And I think that we only need to consider what happened a couple of weeks ago in Washington to see a civilization that needs this principle. Virtue in this desirable civilization is the proper motivation for human acts. And we're going to focus on the virtues of humility and working together. Unity rather than conflict is the basis for social relations. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's not, if I don't get ahead of everybody else, I'm going to be done down and I'm going to lose out. Rather than cutthroat competition, it is a matter of mutual assistance, helping one another, fraternity, brotherhood, sisterhood. And this civilization upholds divine guidance rather than human whims as the norm for ethical behavior. So it's not what I want or the next thing that comes into my head or what seems desirable to me for my own benefit, but God is a part of this situation in terms of the cure as envisaged by, and we can now go to the person concerned on the next slide. And you will recognize Said Nursi, who, well, lived for a better part of the last century. And I just want to speak about one particular address that he gave, and that's going to come up on the next slide. An address that he gave in Damascus, a sermon delivered in 1911, so now over 100 years ago. He delivered this address in Arabic at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus to, it is said, 10,000 or more people. It was preached at a time when the Ottoman Empire had lost a good deal of its territory, indeed most of its territory. It was in a sorry state. Nursi lived until, I think, the early 1960s. And he translated this sermon from Arabic into Turkish. He did the translation himself, and he published the sermon in a revised and expanded and updated version. You'll easily find this if you go into Google on the internet, the Damascus sermon of Said Nursi. Would you go to the next slide, please? So, quoting from him, from his work, The Words, he says that a religiously motivated civilization should be distinguished by God-given morals, not just something that we make up ourselves or that we think might be a good thing. And it should be distinguished by turning towards the Almighty God with humility, which is one of the virtues that I want to illustrate. Recognizing, he says, your impotence, that's your powerlessness, your poverty, and your defectiveness, and so be a slave or be subservient in his presence, that is, in God's presence. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So the ethical qualities or virtues that are underlined by Said Nursi could be listed as follows. And here we take these from the Shafqat, from the Urdu list. He speaks of affection, benevolence, compassion, goodness, kindness, isn't that a lovely word, kindness, love, sensitivity, sympathy, and warmth. If our ethical systems were to be qualified by those qualities, that would be a lovely system in which to live. If we go to the next slide, please. So Said Nursi says that the aim of humanity and the duty of human beings is to be molded by God-given ethics and good character. And then by knowing our own impotence, we seek refuge with divine power. By seeing our own weakness, we rely on divine strength. By realizing our own poverty, we trust in divine mercy. By seeing our own need, we seek help from divine riches. By seeing our own faults, we ask pardon through divine forgiveness. And by realizing our deficiency, we become glorifiers of divine perfection. So a quotation from Said Nursi from the words. And if we could go to the next slide, I want to link this up now with a statement that was published just a short time ago, only a little over a month ago. The title is the Sydney Statement, and this models itself on other declarations, for example, the Beirut Declaration of 2017 and the Washington Declaration of 2018. It took 2 years to put this Sydney Statement together with consultations and with a meeting of what is called the Youth Parliament of the World Religions. So it is building bridges between believers from different religions. The statement went through any number of drafts, at least 14 drafts, probably more. And the commitments in the Sydney Statement are listed as you see them there. Those who sign up to the statement agree to be passionately religious and compassionately interreligious, to treat others as we want to be treated, to show love, care, and respect for others in our daily lives. What a challenge that is. To promote mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation between believers. And we're going to give some examples of that. To acknowledge both our commonalities, so for example, the commonalities between Christianity and Islam, and our differences, and to support recognition of society's religious diversity. We are made up, our society, of many religious commitments. And if we could go then to the next statement, the next slide, where we want to expand a little on that principle of acknowledging our commonalities and our differences. And I'm thinking in particular of Islam and Christianity, but you could take Buddhism and Hinduism or any other religion if you want to. And this is the kind of commitment, building on what we have in common as the foundation for communication between us and mutual understanding. At the same time, honesty and integrity compel us to acknowledge differences, including fundamental and irreconcilable disagreements between religions. We will not seek easy agreement through compromise, so we won't throw in the towel. But when conflicts arise, we will have mature, robust discussion, always with courtesy and respect for the conscience and sincerity of the other. And thirdly, we will not resort to inducement, will not try to fool the others. We won't resort to coercion or violence to assert our religious claims. We will agree to disagree on irreconcilable differences and to cooperate on the many values that we hold in common. So I wonder then, could we go to the next slide, please? Where the values of the Sydney Statement are set out, and we'll simply note them in passing, and we will focus more in particular on two of them on the following page. First of all, the dignity of the human person, the value of life, value of freedom, the value of equality, safety and security, hospitality, gratitude, and go to the next slide, please. Generosity and service, humility, respect, openness, care for the environment, and solidarity. So I want to focus just on humility and solidarity by way of example. So if we could go to the next slide, please, which is on humility, I hope. Yeah. So this is what the Sydney Statement says about humility. So quoting from the Sydney Statement, no individual or religion has a monopoly on truth. Not my religion, not your religion. I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. My religion does not have a monopoly on truth. Nor can anyone comprehend or possess transcendent mystery. All religious believers are humble, the Sydney Statement says, in acknowledging the limited reach of their finite minds and their utter dependence on inspiration or enlightenment or revelation. Revelation in particular referring to Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So here's a quotation from the Quran, and I've taken it from the study Quran translation. So the Prophet is addressed, praise be unto him. Remember your Lord inwardly, the Quran says, in all humility and awe, without raising your voice, in the mornings and in the evenings. Do not be one of the heedless. So noting that quotation from the Quran, I'm going to come back to that in a few slides from now and offer you another translation, which may give you a different perspective on it. So if we could move to the next slide, please. And here we have a quotation from the Jewish scriptures, also part of the Christian scriptures, from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 66. The kind of person, Isaiah says, on whom I look with favor, is one with a poor and humble spirit, who trembles at my word. A humble spirit, who trembles at my word. If we could go to the next slide, please. Again, from the Jewish and Christian scriptures, the prophet Micah, and this is very well known, many of you will recognize this. You have been told, O mortal, what is good and what the Lord requires of you. What is that? To act justly, to love tenderly, and walk humbly with your God upon the earth. And then going to the Christian scriptures on the next slide. From the Gospel of Matthew, and quoting from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 18, Jesus, whom the Gospels are about, called a child to him, stood the child among them, among the disciples, and said, yes, I tell you that unless you change and become like little children, you won't even enter the kingdom of heaven. So The greatest in the kingdom is whoever makes himself as humble as this child. As humble as this child. And if we could go to the next slide then. Next slide, please. We have a hadith. You've gone one too many, I think. Yeah, all right, we'll go with this one. This is another quotation from that same ayah of the Quran that we mentioned earlier. Think on your Lord morning and evening, humbly and filled with awe, speechless with adoration. When I read that the first time, I could not believe the emotional effect it had on me, the beauty of it. It has a real cutting edge. And I have to thank I have to thank Professor Johns for that rendering. And so we'll go to the next slide, which again continues in Islam. And we are looking here at one of the hadith on humility. Its authenticity is fair, so reasonably good. And it reads as follows: the messenger of God, that's Muhammad, praise be unto him, may God bless him and grant him peace, came out when walking as he prayed for rain. And then there are 5 adverbs. How did he come out when he was walking and praying for rain? He came out humbly, and we have the Arabic there at the bottom, unpretentiously, deferentially, unhurriedly, not rushing, not running, speaking appealingly, speaking gently. And so if we could go just to the next slide for a quick look.
We apologize, Doctor. You have 3 minutes to end your presentation. Thank you.
Right. Yep, good. So we can go to the next slide. You've had a look at the Arabic. I've spoken then about humility. I want to speak now about solidarity. And I'm thinking here of His Holiness Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmad Al-Tayyib, who produced in 2019 a document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. And if we could go to the next slide. They ask that this document become the object of research and reflection in all schools, universities, and institutes of formation, thus helping to educate new generations to bring goodness and peace to others, to be defenders everywhere of the rights of the oppressed and of the least of our brothers and sisters. And so the next slide, which also continues with this document on human fraternity. The Pope says, and the Grand Imam, our aspiration is that this declaration on human fraternity may be a sign of the closeness between East and West, between North and South, and between all who believe that God has created us to understand one another, cooperate with one another, and live as brothers and sisters who love one another. And if we go to the next slide then. So Pope Francis, on his visit to Iraq just at the beginning of last month, also met with the Grand Ayatollah, Sayyid Ali Husseini Sistani, an Iranian-born Shi'i cleric and a leader of the Iraqi Shi'i community, and they met in the holy city of Najaf. And I wonder, could we look at the picture of their meeting? They are meeting. They are meeting. And then to the next slide. So the Pope says, during his visit to Iraq, only if we succeed in regarding each other with our differences, as members of the same human family, can we begin an effective process of reconstruction and leave a better, more just, and more human world to the future generations? And then if we could go to the next slide. The Pope also on that visit to Iraq met with Jewish leaders and Muslim leaders and other leaders on the plain of Ur, which is where Abraham was born and brought up. So I want to finish this now with a text that you're not going to be able to see, but it is from a document that came out just in the last week or so on pastoral orientations on climate displaced people. And there's a quotation from that document that I'd like to read to you, and I'll finish with this. So quoting from that document, it says, "Young people have much to offer, thanks to their enthusiasm and commitment, to say nothing of their thirst for truth, which constantly reminds us of the fact that hope is not utopian, it's not pie in the sky, and that peace is always a good that can be attained. It's not impossible to live in peace. We have seen this in the way many young people have become active in calling the attention of political leaders to the issue of climate change." And so with this, I want to thank you, and in hopeful fraternity, in humble solidarity for world peace and living together, I will say goodbye to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Raman Canning, right? Because we have enough time, so we have no question for you. We would like to invite the next guest speaker, Professor Dr. Greg Barton from Australia.
Halo, selamat siang. Selamat sejahtera. Apa lebih baik?
The floor is yours.
Ya, terima kasih. Apa lebih baik berbahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris?
English is better, sir.
Okay, then I'll share my screen. I won't be long. I'll be make a quick presentation. I know that you're running out of time, so let me be as quick as I can. Okay, so you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about Gus Dur's values for education, based on my understanding of his thoughts and knowing him as a human being reasonably well, spending a lot of time with him. So these are my perceptions, but I'll, as far as I can, use his words to capture what I understand of his approach to education, which is his approach to life and approach to values. So sometimes we think of Gus Dur with statements like this, you know, why be so stressed? We think of this as somebody who is certainly very eccentric and perhaps light-hearted. In a way, of course, Gus Dur was light-hearted. He was very humorous. He was very humble. He didn't take himself seriously, and he enjoyed life. But there's a very serious side to him, which comes through in his approach to education and approach to life in general. So this statement here that there's no point in having regrets about the situation we find for ourselves in life, what fate deals us. We have to work hard to advance those things that we value, which is very much his approach to the whole of life, and it lies at the heart of his approach to education. I find it very striking, and he told me about this in the months before he passed away, that he wanted to have a tombstone, which he indeed does have in his grave in Jombang, that reads in English, here rests, or here lies a humanist, here rests a humanist. Also, of course, in Arabic and in Indonesian, di sini berbaring seorang pejuang kemanusiaan. So what did he mean by humanist, a pejuang kemanusiaan, a champion of humanity? Why did he want this on his tombstone? I mean, he's a famous religious figure from a famous religious family, from the world's largest religious association, and this is his tombstone at his tomb at a major Islamic school, Pesantren. Why did he choose these words? And I think it reflects his approach to life, his approach to his faith, and certainly his approach to learning. So when he says that if we, in valuing our fellow human beings, we value our creator, we give glory to our creator. The inverse is true. Of course, we can't give glory to our creator if we don't value humanity and see human beings, each one equally, man or woman, of any ethnicity or any social position, of any religion, as being equally made in the image of God, being made as creatures of God and valued by God. This is the core principle of his approach to life and to learning. So it meant that he was very curious about a wide range of worldviews and lived experiences. For example, one of his favorite novelists, and he liked novels particularly, so he read widely in, of course, Indonesian, but also in Arabic and in English and French and German. One of his favorite novelists was the American novelist Chaim Potok, who's a Jewish rabbi. And in particular, I remember talking about My Name is Asher Lev, which describes the experience of a young Jewish religious student in a religious school. And he said, I like this because it reminds me in so many ways of life in a pesantren. I think what this anecdote tells us is he respects common humanity and he enters into the worlds of other people. In this case, through literature. He also a great enthusiast of film. For Gus Dur, this was all part of education. I'm not saying that students should go off to the cinema all the time or read novels all the time, but the flip side is you can't have a full education unless you're consuming the many products of humanity in the humanities as well as in the sciences, because you enter into the worlds of those people who write and produce films, and you come to see the world from another person's point of view. This is a really key part of his approach to learning. Of course, you have with that a insatiable curiosity. He's forever curious, trying to understand what drives somebody, how they live, what they're doing. I'm just having trouble advancing my... This, of course, results in an enormous wellspring of tolerance. So it's an educated tolerance, a tolerance that comes out of a deep understanding of the other person and a deep valuing of the other person. And so he said that the more educated somebody is, the higher their level of knowledge, the more tolerant they are. Tolerant for him, of course, means a very proactive, positive approach to appreciating and respecting somebody else, not just putting up with them, but very much appreciating them, loving them, respecting them. And he said, the more you are educated, the more you will respect other people. This should drive us in a direction in our education and our learning towards character, towards acting with sincerity, to acting in an honest and compassionate fashion. So he said once of students at Pesantren that if you want to see how good a student is, a Pesantren student is, a santri, don't look at them when they're in school, look at them after they've graduated, because it's how we live our life that shows what sort of student we are. I think that's a really deep insight. I mean, sometimes we can be focused on tests and results. For Gus Dur, learning was very much about character and life, and it wasn't about achievement of degrees by itself. It was about how we lived our life. He was also deeply passionate about justice and had a deep commitment to seeking truth. For him, intellectual truth was something that comes from God, and so can be sought in all corners of God's world. But it's not just an intellectual exercise, it's also about trying to live in such a way as we transform the world and make it a better place. But to live in this fashion opens you up to criticism. So Gus Dur's strong conviction, which was demonstrated throughout his life, is you can't approach education and learning and life and living and your mission in this world be constantly worried about what other people say of you. It doesn't matter how good you are, there'll always be critics. You have to focus on moving ahead, doing what you know to be the right thing, to focus on what you're called to do. So he said of himself, he said, I don't care whether I'm popular or not, my popularity is destroyed, whether people criticize me and curse me, whatever happens, I want to do the right thing. And then when he said this, he was speaking as a leader. I want to try and save my nation from being split up. So he had a very idealistic approach to leadership, which he took into his presidency, which I think is why he achieved so much as president in such a short time. He knew that he couldn't remain in that position indefinitely because he was challenging established political order, whether military or civil, and upsetting a lot of people, but it was driven by a passionate idealism. And this is an idealism that saw Indonesia becoming more democratic, more open, more just, advancing in history. He was a great Democrat, not because democracy in itself is the end goal, but because accountability and responsibility are important. So that very much drove what he did. And he's fully acknowledged his humanity, that he said, talking about himself really, we are not some sort of mythical, heroic figure from the past. Myself, he was saying, just an ordinary human being with a wife, with a family, with children, knowing what it means to feel afraid, to be uncertain. Nevertheless, we push forward. We have to be brave. We have to overcome fear and do what is right. One of Gus Dur's more famous sayings, Tuhan tidak perlu dibela, dia sudah maha segalanya, belalah mereka yang diperlakukan tidak adil. So God doesn't need to be defended because he is everywhere, he is everything. He is the creator of the universe. In a sense, he is so much beyond needing our defending of him. But what he has called us to do as his creatures and his followers is to defend those who are being treated unjustly. And this lies very much at the heart of his vision. He is a great Islamic figure and a great Islamic leader, but for him, true religion reaches beyond labels and definitions. And the spirit of true religion is in doing good to others. And if you do good to others, they'll look beyond differences and recognize a common humanity. So I've talked about his approach to life, but his approach to life and his approach to education are bound up. He was very much a figure of Java, of Nahdlatul Ulama, of Islam, of Indonesia, and very much enjoyed all of those cultural roots and identities. But he loved French literature and film and read German novels and American novels. He entered into the worlds of other people. His curiosity to learn was not just an intellectual curiosity, it was a curiosity to understand humanity, and it was matched together in a humble fashion with a desire to try and live his life as best as he could to transform the world. So education should have a practical outcome. And I think that doesn't capture everything about Gus Dur or his approach to education, but it captures some of the most important things. So I'll leave it here, and thank you again for the invitation to speak today.
Thank you so much, Professor Greg Barton, for your insightful comment and good presentation. So we have a question for you, right? In the title of the decline and resurrection of Turkish Islamism, the story of Tayyip Erdogan, AKP, in the year of 2017, you said that Democrats no longer existed. The former Islamists easily returned to their original ideology, showing that despite assertions to the contrary, their respect for democracy and pluralism had not truly been internalized. Likewise, the Turkish Spring turned all too quickly towards autumn and then winter. Please, can you explain us what you mean? Thanks. Can I should I repeat the question again?
Sorry, this is was this a question to me? Sorry, I wasn't sure whether you were speaking to the entire panel. Was there a question you wanted me to answer?
Yeah. Yes. So in your article, right, entitled "Of the Decline and Resurrection of Turkish Islamism," right, in the story of Tayyip Erdogan, SKP, right, and you said that democrats no longer existed. The former Islamists easily returned to their original ideology, showing that despite assertions to the contrary, their respect for democracy and pluralism had not been internalized. Likewise, the Turkish spring turned all too quickly towards autumn and then winter. So please, can you explain us what you mean? Thanks.
Sure. I'll give a very brief explanation. I've got to go, unfortunately, because it's Easter and it's a busy schedule. But let me answer this very quickly. What I was talking about in the case of Turkey is that it's a long and complicated story, but the personal aspirations of former Prime Minister, now President Tayyip Erdogan, overrode everything. So although within his party, AKP, there had been a lot of good achieved, and it had been inspired by religious values, I think for Erdogan himself, the focus was a more personal focus. And when he feared loss of power, he turned the whole orientation of his party, the people who had been most deeply democratic were pushed to one side. And so there had been a consolidation of democracy in Turkey, but it was unfinished at the time that Erdogan in late 2014 decided to he effectively become more despotic because of fear of losing power and being made accountable. So so many of the years of good work were undone. It's a longer and more complicated story than that, but it shows you that in trying to transform society and make things better, there's an ongoing struggle, and there are forces pushing things in other directions. And a common story, of course, of politics and of life is personal ambition and personal power. And the longer somebody stays in a senior position, the more likely it is that they will fall back on chasing their own interests, which unfortunately has happened in Turkey to, I think, very tragic results. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to leave so quickly, but I've got to move on because I've got to drive for several hours with my parents. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, my Professor Greg Barton, for your insightful comments and good answers to our questions. So we are going to the section of closing remarks. So as you know, it has been observed that during the COVID-19, and most students at university around the world focus on online class, and they are concerned that student knowledge and moral are affected, especially moral one. Yes, indeed. However, before COVID-19, moral values in education also declines because people from all walks of life, especially young people, right, focus mostly on material consumptions. And so that the moral and values are the solution to the challenge we are facing today, as raised by Professor Qur'anic. And the culture of the peace would prevail, outweigh the culture of war. Education plays a crucial role in the modern globalization that we are facing, the constraint of international dilemma. Moral education is more important than ever before, because the goal of education, right, is to shape the your behavior to be a good citizen, right? And as well, might doesn't make rise in world politics, and what should outweigh say interest in propelling properly motivating for human acts. So on behalf of the organizing team, we would like to deeply thank all participants, especially our distinguished panelists, to spend their invaluable time to share your insightful and practical knowledge on moral and value in education. So we hope fully that we have this seminar next time. So thank you from Cambodia. Kim Reep Dear. Goodbye. Stay healthy.